3, 2, 1.
This is The Jungle, an up-close, unvarnished look inside leadership and business strategy. We wade into the real-world leaders' face and explore what they do to create a path forward, because that's what business is. Wild, exciting.
It's The Jungle.
And we are back in the jungle. Derek, loving the background in the new office there. It looks good. Did you pick out all that stuff, or was that Stacy helping you with your background?
It's not great. So clearly Stacy would have it way more dialed than that. I picked it out and just kind of arranged it. Sleeping Giant Capital mug, LBS mug matching. Look at that, Doug. You see that?
I do.
A matching Sleeping Giant Capital mug with an LBS mug for the platform that we're building.
Yep. Do you notice my my liquid death? Where is it? Right here.
Yeah.
The liquid death and the positive energy drink behind me. I
Yeah,
need to round this out in the back.
What's that other stuff on the other shoulder? Is that like feng shui stuff, or I don't know if that's a word? What is like office to make you feel good, calming?
This right here.
Yeah.
So I got my Sleeping Giant Capital mug. I have and then I have a lot of artwork, or I guess pottery, sculptures, maybe is a better word. Shout out to Jane Dutton. Every time I go to her class to speak at the University of Michigan, she always has this amazing gift of some like pottery, and some of it that her daughter made, actually, who I coincidentally but did not know her. I did not know that Jane was her mom when I met her back in 2005. But anyhow, so she's made that. So it's a nice. It looks good. Doesn't it look good? It kind of matches the color scheme, actually.
Yeah. So wait. Tell me, when you go to Jane's class, we had Jane as a podcaster. One of my favorite podcast guests was Jane back in the day. Had got so many comments on that podcast. When you go to her class, she gives you a pottery gift. When you go talk to her class at Michigan.
You don't think I deserve that?
No. I really see her doing that. Like once you said it, I was like, yeah, I could see her giving a nice a meaningful pottery gift. It's not just some like card or.
This is from Arbor Tile Works. So this is my a beautiful tile work that I use for my my mug on my desk. So it's, just meaningful artifacts, right? Meaningful artifacts. So it's trying to be a little more elevated now with my backdrop, so
she's impressive. Jane's impressive. And that's cool that she gives you those gifts.
Yep. Well, I'm glad we actually could do a podcast here. First podcast virtually from the office.
First virtual podcast from the office.
Yeah.
Third one recorded at the office. I think you said second, but you missed, you took a day off on me. So you missed one.
It's true. Yeah. That was, I heard it's really good though. That podcast will come out. I guess that podcast will come out before this one, but I still haven't seen it yet. But I hear it's good. I
haven't seen it yet. I'm waiting for the production studio, which I'll give Justice a shout out. Justice to do the editing.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. So we had a great conversation today with our guest Carl Erickson, who has two big titles right now: chairman and founder of Atomic. And he's also chairman of the Michigan Capital Network, which is a angel investing venture capital network here in the state of Michigan. We got to know Carl through a couple connections, came down to Sleeping Giant, spent the morning, great wisdom, great insight. And we were like, this is a guy that we need to have on the podcast. So,
and a former academic
and a former and PhD indeed.
PhD.
Yep.
Yeah. Very, very, very smart individual. Successful in his venture investing and his running his company, and just a lot of wisdom there.
Yeah. What was your takeaway from the conversation?
Besides that, he asked to send him your paper. Did he do the podcast?
Yeah. Once it's copy edited, yes. He's the only guest to have asked us about an academic paper, I think. So that feels good a little bit.
He might actually understand it, Doug, because I'm not sure I just understand it, but he might grasp it. So I'll go right to the evergreen. He said a lot of really good things, but I like, we're aligned on this. I like evergreen philosophy. I grew up, working for a gentleman that had evergreen philosophy. Everything was long-term. Every time you went to a decision, it was, we're a long-term partner. We're a long-term this. And I kind of grew up working for someone that always said that, and still believes that philosophy today. And this was, I'm like 30 years for him, and they're still running that company. So it's just, it's interesting to hear him say that his 100-year goal for his company. We want to be in operations for over 100 years, and that's how we think through things. It's not like I want to get in and exit. I want to, sell to the nearest bidder at the highest price. It's community focused and it's long term, and that makes you make choices differently. And some of our mentors or investors talk the same way, right, Doug? It's long term, and that's our philosophy. We want to develop things over the long term. And so it was really refreshing to hear him talk about that philosophy and how it actually is a value in his company, and how they make decisions, and how it is a guide rail for them on investing over time, and building sustainable long-term companies. It's just a really interesting goal to have. It's especially coming from a venture capital investor. You would think to hear the exact opposite. Deploy fast, sell fast, move fast, deploy more, raise more, deploy. So the fact that it aligned with us at Sleeping Giant Capital and our kind of investment philosophy was nice to hear too. So I'll go with that. He mentioned evergreen. I think we already chatted that we're going to steal that term, and use it, but I like it. I looked up the Evergreen website, really good stuff there. So I really like that part. Doug, what did you have as a takeaway?
I mean, this is something that I thought was brilliant, and something that I wrote down, like, need to do, is this notion of strategic principles versus strategic plans. And that it's something we wrestle with even as we're growing and scaling and doing all these startup activities. You can kind of tentatively maybe have a plan, but to spend time to have a plan, by the time you do that, the world has changed. You've tested something, you've realized it doesn't work, or you realize something else works. And the plan it's difficult to understand. It's hard to do. It can be out of step with the environment pretty quickly. But this notion of develop some great strategic principles. So one of them is that he has is great, not big. And that's a strategic principle. It guides their decision-making, guides what they do as a company. And you don't need a plan for that. That will help kind of, and I like this idea of just having those core principles you operate off of, because it gives you enough structure, but it also gives you the flexibility. And I think that's always what, I'm looking for as you, as an entrepreneur, with what we're doing, is enough structure where where you're going, but enough freedom to learn and try and adapt and experiment, because and pivot. So strategic principles, not strategic plans. Really interesting insight.
Yeah. And think about our experience over the last few years and how that resonates, Doug, right? We've grown and continue to grow and changes so fast. And not that we don't have long-term goals and we're going to hit those long-term goals, but the day-to-day stuff is you just keep growing in certain areas. And you look at the great, not big, and you look at some of the strategic planning processes that certain organizations around here have gone through, and you're like, I don't understand it. I don't get it. It sits on a shelf. I'm not going to throw out names or anything, but I've seen some strategic plans, and I'm like, what does that even mean? And so I like the strategic principles, even the great, not big. We fight this all the time with LBS in our undergrad major, right? And part of it was, we maybe were once a big major, but weren't great. So we've focused on being great now. And so where's the fine line between taking people into the acquire class? How many people can you take before it's not great experience for them anymore? So it's really good to see that as a strategic principles. I really like that.
And faster. It's way faster. The other one I want to steal is give a shit. As a cultural value, because you can tell when someone, when they care, when they don't care. You can tell it in their work, if they care, if they don't care. You can tell it in the ceremony you're at or the event. Do they care? Do they not care? I mean, you can just tell. And I like that that's something else that I hope we can borrow is that mentality. I think it's really good. So
I like to give a shit. That's a good mentality. I've heard it rephrased and maybe not like the Eeyore principle as a company in town. I think it was Newmine also was on the podcast, so listen back to that one. But they had an Eeyore principle, right? Like Eeyore was on Winnie the Pooh, and he was always appeared not to be as energetic and caring about what he was doing.
Yeah, I really like that. So hope everybody enjoys this conversation. There's lots of good nuggets. We cover a lot of territory. So Carl Erickson, chairman and founder of Atomic and chairman of Michigan Capital Network. Hope everybody enjoys. The Jungle is produced by the Center for Principled Leadership and Business Strategy in Western Michigan University's Hayworth College of Business. Our center supports the leadership and business strategy major, conducts large-scale consulting projects, and trains professionals in acquiring and operating small businesses. To learn more, visit wmich.edu/leadership center. Carl Erickson, welcome to the Jungle.
The Jungle. I didn't know was the name of it, but thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I know you're a big tea drinker. What tea are you drinking right now?
Tastes like a lemon ginger that my wife selected.
Lemon ginger. Is this a Rishi tea selection?
What's Rishi? I don't know.
Oh, Rishi tea is I'm gonna give another shout out to Rishi. Maybe if I shout them out like 3 times, I already wrote their CEO to try to get on the podcast. Rishi tea. They're in Milwaukee, I believe, in Wisconsin. And they have outstanding RISHI. They have an amazing lemon ginger and amazing turmeric ginger, which I actually enjoyed this morning. So
I'll look for it.
I'm a big fan. I'm actually drinking coffee for the first time ever, I think, Derek, on the podcast. This is the Mickelson coffee.
Yeah, first time. How is it? Do you like it?
It's good. I can feel myself being elevated with caffeine, but also very mellow with the theanine, the added theanine from it.
Yeah, that means you also jumped in my stash, apparently.
It's very clear where to find that. So for all the listeners who are tuning in not on YouTube, this is our first podcast recorded, or actually the second podcast recorded from our new space here at Sleeping Giant Capital, downtown Kalamazoo. First time doing it in our offices, though. And as you can see, for all the fans that are not actually tuning in, you can see an amazing background for Derek McIver with the pictures and the mugs and the books with all the notes. Mine's a little bit sparse still. I'm still working on it, but we're gonna get better for future podcasts. You've got a really great. Is that a record collection? Is that a record player behind you?
No records. No. Those are all books.
Those are books. Okay. It looks like a cool sound system there in the background. That's a nice background. I think he might get the best award for background, Derek, so far.
I like the lighting in the bookshelf. It's a pretty nice bookshelf, and the lighting is a unique touch on it.
Yeah.
It comes from the bookshelf.
The bookshelf system is vintage Herman Miller, something called CSS, designed by a guy named George Nelson, who was their director of design for many, many years in like the 60s and 70s. Super handy, flexible stuff.
It's very cool. It's very cool. I like it a lot.
Vintage West Michigan.
Yeah.
Very, very well done. And this is your house you're coming to us from, Carl? Or are you
this is my living room.
Okay.
So we had a great opportunity to meet with you, Carl, about a month ago now. I'd say, when you came down to Kalamazoo, and we got to chat a little bit more about your experience. We thought, fantastic guest to have on the podcast. Chairman and founder of Atomic, which is where we'll start our conversation. Maybe for the listeners who don't know so much about Atomic or what you do, maybe describe a little bit about the company that you founded and what you guys currently do.
Yeah, so Atomic Object is a 20-year-old software design and development consultancy, which is the fancy way of saying that we build software products for larger customers. We don't have our own products. It's all custom work. And we like to be on the income side of their P&L. So our products are used by them to grow their business or establish a new business, or they are the product they sell. We don't concentrate or specialize in any one industry. We work in all different industries. We concentrate and specialize in trying to be as good as we can possibly be in product development. And that turns out to be a really complicated subspecialty that our clients aren't as good at. And we partner with them to bring that to them.
And what would be what's a great client for you? Are these Michigan companies? Do you guys go national? Where is a great customer, and what do they look like for you?
About half of our clients are in the state of Michigan, and the other half are in the other states. A great customer is one who sees that their business requires continuous innovation, and software is more and more a part of that for them to be competitive. A lot of times nationally or even globally, and that they're playing to win. So they want to make a success of their business. And I say this as if like you would think that everybody would care that way, but the really, really large customers, sometimes not everyone's playing that way. So on the other hand, software development is a pretty expensive thing. Custom software development is expensive endeavor, and our software has to be able to justify the expense that the investment represents, which means you're probably a company of 200 million revenue and up.
So I want to dig into one spot because, and Doug knows I'm going. You said we specialize on the income side of the income statement. Is that what I heard you say?
We prefer to be on the income side of the P&L.
And so what can you dig into that for a little bit? Why from a consulting business, do you want to be on the income side? Just for listeners, and this is a good business.
So if you think about the expense side, Derek, the win there is pretty limited. You can only get some operational efficiency. You can maybe reduce some expenses a bit. But if you're on the income side, the upside is unlimited. So what we do for the company is that much more strategically valuable, and it could be a lot bigger win. And so it gets more budget, it gets more attention, leadership, time and energy, and people are paying way more attention to it than they are on, reducing costs a little bit. Operational efficiency is great, it's necessary, but when it comes to being strategic, not so much.
So custom software, and I saw the post on LinkedIn, was this, and is it 20 or 30 years ago that you guys?
20 years ago. 2000, right. September 2001.
2001. So you have probably seen an unbelievable change in your industry. Just software. It doesn't feel like an industry anymore. If software feels like it's everything. What has been what is a little bit of been that journey for you across 20 years, which I imagine has just been really exciting and interesting?
It has been, and it's exciting. We have a goal of being a 100-year-old company. And so we're 20% of the way there. And that doesn't sound like a big number, but on the other hand, 20 years is a lot of years. And when I look back on it, I am struck by how many changes we've already gone through. So when we started the business in 2001, we were building desktop software. We occasionally still do that, but it's pretty rare. And it wasn't too long after we started the business that the web became commercially viable, and the web became the platform for deploying a lot of business software. So most of our revenue was coming from web. And then it wasn't too much longer after that, say 2007, 2008, when mobile started to be something more than a toy. And we've seen the transition from, oh yeah, we're going to build a web app and we'd like a mobile component to it, to we're going to build a mobile app. Oh, and we might have to have a web component to do the administration. Just an entire shift in focus and technology. So at some level, you can say our business hasn't changed. It's custom software development. On the other hand, the platforms have changed. The specific tools we use have changed dramatically. And I'm really proud to say that that change has been driven from the people who are closest to it, which is to say our designers and developers. They bring into our company energy and excitement and interest from staying up on what's happening in the technology world. And that's really where we're following the trends and bringing, new potential to our clients, new tools. Where I see the innovation happening on the business leader side, in the role that I played for many years, and now my co-CEOs are playing, is much more innovation on the business side about business processes, culture, business practices, ownership structure, those sorts of things. So I think that's actually a really healthy split, because you're getting contributions from both sort of perspectives, and both are important.
So how do you create that culture of importing great ideas? And, I think we think a lot about this in higher ed, of, the changes that are afoot in higher ed, and there's a lot of them. And so I think there's a great need in both higher ed, but in many companies, to import ideas from the bottom up and successfully, either experiment with them, deploy them, scale them. What's your lesson to people who are interested in this, and how you do that effectively? Because that could also seem like it could turn into a giant mess and chaos and too much experimentation and things getting out of control.
So there is some cost to experimentation. We've bet on a few technologies that didn't work out, and we had to back that out and replace things that were expensive for us to replace. So it's not always the cleanest process. it's a process that's a little hard to control, but I think these things are all good. Like this is what comes along with what makes it successful is loose hands on the wheel, so to speak. Personally, Doug, I believe that innovation comes from people who care. And our give a shit value mantra codifies that basically. So if you're a maker at Atomic, you're a designer, you're a developer, you're a tester, and you're a good culture match, then you care about the company and your clients and your craft and your colleagues and your community. And so if you're a person who cares, then, and you couple that with a key Atomic trait, which is relentless dissatisfaction with the status quo, then you're going to find a better way to do things. And you're smart, so you can figure those things out. So that's driving you because you care. And you know, the rest of that is, I would say, like example of cultural business strategy. We don't make strategic plans so much as we embrace and honor the certain key strategic principles. And one of them is that, like, culture is the thing that we use to stay a healthy services firm.
It's really, I'm taking a couple notes. So go ahead, Derek.
I was writing all that down too. So I was trying to keep up there. So you just said something really interesting. We don't as much rely on strategic plans as we embrace strategic principles. So if I'm a leader in West Michigan and I just heard that, I'm trying to like probably decipher that. Could you break those two out? And because I think this is really important, and a lot of strong leaders have this philosophy, right? It's, you know, plans are plans, but these strategic principles, if we operate along them, we will be successful. And it's kind of bottom up, people driven as opposed to top down. So could you break that out just so I'm clear on that too?
Yeah, I'm sure this is not the case with every organization. I'm sure there are some organizations that do this really well, but I think there's a lot of organizations for which strategic planning is not the most effective exercise, and it oftentimes results in a lot of time and a lot of expense going into creating a plan that isn't understood by most of the people in the company, isn't necessarily followed, might live on a shelf, but not have a lot of impact. And it's usually of the form of, you know, we're going to grow. And its underlying root of this plan is it's something about growth and like a target for how big we're going to be or what we're going to do. We have one of our strategic principles is great, not big. Also the name of my blog. So great, not big does not mean you cannot grow. What it means is your focus is on doing the best job possible and getting better at doing it all the time. That's the relentless dissatisfaction with the status quo at work. So if you're doing that, if you're focusing on being as good as you can possibly be, then you're going to have to deal with growth because you're going to have something that people want. You're going to solve problems for people, and they're going to want you to solve more of those problems. And they're going to tell their friends about the problems you solve for them. And so you'll find this pressure to grow, and you'll have to deal with that because growth is always a challenge to structure. We certainly have done a lot of that because we've grown at about a 20% compounded annual rate for 20 years. So the point is, we didn't set a growth goal and say, we want to be a $10 million company or we want to be 80 people. We said, we want to be as good as we can possibly be. Great, not big.
Now, are these strategic principles, are they synonyms with your culture, or are they distinguished from your culture?
I think they are a part of the culture, but the culture has a lot of dimensions to it. And these business principles are probably the parts that most atoms would least recognize as part of our culture. And that's partly because they're under the hood in so many ways and places that they don't even recognize them, and possibly also because we haven't done a good job of making them explicit. So another example would be structural profitability. You know, there's a lot of ways to run a consultancy, and a lot of consultancies think that the best way to do that is to set a price on a project that you think the customer is willing to pay. We establish a budget for the customer based on the work we do to find out what their needs are and what a responsible budget is. And then so that we're not wondering at the end of a project if we were profitable on a project, we build in the way we bill our time is ensures that we'll be profitable and that we get to the end point with the customer with a product that we've built for them that makes sense for them and gives them the highest likelihood of success. So a win for the customer, structural profitability for us.
So how do you implement these, how do you manifest these values? And how did they take on like a life of their own in your company, where they go from just maybe your thought or your senior team's thought into living, breathing things that guide behavior?
So in 2006, we hired a friend of ours in the industry to come in and teach our purely development engineering staff about design, because we recognized that design was the thing that was going to limit our impact for our clients. And we weren't having the greatest luck in partnering with design firms. And so we made the decision to internalize it. But that meant we had to learn a lot of stuff. Not only did we have to hire designers, but we had to educate our developers on design to make it work and to integrate those two kind of different cultures. So anyway, we have a guy come in to teach us about design, and we had been friends through a few conferences. And one point during a break, he looks around, he said, Carl, like there's a really distinct set of values or a culture here. Have you ever like documented any of this? I'm like, no, Jeff, I hadn't even thought of doing that. But that gave me the idea to do it. And so I spent a little bit of time observing how we behaved and how we thought about the world and how we treated each other and what people expected, what was okay, what was not okay. And then I just coined 4 different value mantras. Give a shit is usually the most popular. Teach and learn, share the pain, and own it. And I think it's really important to understand that these are observations, not aspirations. I didn't go into a room with a whiteboard and say, I want people to do this. I just looked around and wrote down what I saw and put them into that particular form, which is important, I think, actually. And then since that time, we've added 2. Act transparently was one that we came to a realization that, gosh, that's a big important part of our company is transparency with our clients, transparency internally with our employees. We're an open book management firm from the very get-go. And then think long-term. Think long-term is also a super important one that encapsulates our 100-year goal. And when you think about a 100-year goal, you think, well, like, how could that possibly have utility? Like, none of us around today are even going to know if we ever hit it or not. But what we find is it keeps our eyes on the horizon, and we keep thinking about and making decisions like on a frequent basis that are inspired by a long-term perspective. And that's, I think, a really smart way to run a business.
You slipped something very interesting in there, which it was a hot topic for a while, and it kind of slipped away a little bit. Open book management. First, describe that, and then tell me what benefits you see out of it.
So, Derek, I thought I was so smart that I had invented this thing in like 2001, and I did it because suddenly we were successful enough after a year or so that, oh, this is actually going kind of well, and like there's something here, and people are relying on the job, and some of us even have spouses and family, and they're relying on the job, and but it was still very, very early days. And I was still learning what marketing meant and what sales meant and what running a company meant. I was a professor before I started Atomic. So no formal education in any of those things. And it occurs to me, like, people are relying on Atomic and then implicitly on me. And I like sleeping well at night. So the best way I could do that is to make darn sure everybody knew where things stood. And so we opened the books and I'm sharing everything. I'm sharing the sales pipeline. I'm sharing the P&L. We're talking about all of these things. I'm having to do some education on that because most of us don't learn that stuff. And then I find out a few years later that no, I did not invent this. There's like a name for this, open book management. And other people had done it before me and it worked out really, really well. So we really lived into that. We have a class called The Economics of Atomic that we run everybody through and offer that periodically. So people learn to read a P&L. They know how the financial dynamics of the company work. We have quarterly meetings where we're walking through the results. That led to our employee ownership program. Having educated owners of the company were really important. Our profit sharing is hinged on that. Profit distribution through ownership is hinged on all that information. So it's a virtuous circuit that, like, each of those practices supports itself, I think. Supports the others.
One other question, maybe before we turn to a different topic. So, which value guided the comment you made when you came down here that you haven't laid off an employee for 20 years?
So, we are a company that embraces what I've come to know through the Tugboat Institute as evergreen principles, one of which is people first. And as a consultancy, it would be stupid not to be a people first company, because that's really all you are, is a bunch of smart people whose time and talent you're arranging to benefit and get a client and get paid for it. But I don't know that we don't have like a people first value, but that's pretty deep in the company. And it's always been like, I wouldn't want to be a part of a company that wasn't a people first company. So I think, however, that the fact that we've never had to lay anyone off over 21 years has to do with the fact that we have always diversified our client base. We've let no client become more than 20% of our revenue in any given year. We diversify across industries. So in 2008 and 9, when the automotive industry was really suffering, we did a lot more healthcare work than we usually do. And then, we're back to doing automotive work. Never more than 20% in any one client. So I think that's been a big part of not having to lay anybody off. Being generalists in the kind of work we do, we didn't pick one technology to be specialists in. Those things never last that long in the big scale of things. If you're thinking long-term, like picking a technology is a risky strategy, because you're going to have to like flip that out after a few years. So that's another part that's involved never laying off. Being good storytellers about what we do and how we do it. So being decent at marketing, I think, is providing a constant input of new companies to work with, new clients, keeping people happy, focusing on being great and letting the growth happen, which means our clients are happy and getting value out of the products we build for them. That means we've had good growth over the years. We've gotten through some pretty tough times in 20 years. And I think it's those kinds of things that have gotten us through it.
And one more question before we talk a little bit about the venture capital side of your professional experience. So realized through what you sent me about you're a member at the Center for Positive Organizations at University of Michigan Ross School of Business. I'm a faculty affiliate there. I'm curious how that kind of approach to organizations was that something that you discovered, that you were doing similar practices that they're trying to showcase in terms of what makes organizations positive, or are you implementing stuff that you've learned there, or how did that relationship begin?
So there's 3 communities that we're a part of that have been just fantastic experiences within the last 10 years to discover other like-minded people. It feels like finding your tribe. And the Center for Positive Organizations was one of those. The others are the Small Giants community and the Tugboat Institute. So CPO is the most academically inclined, no surprise, right? Comes out of the Ross School of Business. So I like that. I was a professor. I like the academic angle. I like the study and the learning, the discipline there. But all of those things that they promote and then they teach on felt very natural to us, but we didn't have like the frameworks, and we didn't have the disciplined thinking around all of those. So that's been very, very useful to get the access to the ideas, and the people who have studied it a lot has been pushing us in a way that we're naturally inclined, and that's just making us better at exexecution.
I think
Talk about the other two for us, so people might. I think they're West Michigan groups, if not, to tell what they are and how they've helped you, just to give them some.
Yeah, so Small Giants is a community that's built around a book, actually, that a guy named Bo Burlingham wrote many years ago. It was just a few years after I started Atomic. It was a seminal book in my understanding of business. It bucks the conventional wisdom through case studies that the only reason that you're in business is to make money, and that the only positive outcome is a big company. So it supported my great, not big inherent philosophy at a time when the world was telling me something else, and I wasn't sure if that was crazy or if I was crazy. So it was very supportive in that regard. And now it's an organization that has members and brings people together, a few hundred people together every year, usually in Detroit, for a really fantastic summit experience. Again, all different industries, philosophical alignment. Tugboat Institute is a similar organization, 200 companies. The evergreen philosophy is encoded by 7 words that start with P, things like privately held, profitable, people first, perseverance, pragmatic innovation, paced growth, and purpose driven. I got all 7 Ps. That was another, like, I found my tribe experience. And I just got back from an exemplar visit with them last week. We went and visited Edward Jones and learned all about that company. And it's fascinating. What a great company. But it's great to hear from a 100-year-old company where there's a lot of overlap. And get this, 50,000 people work at Edward Jones. So many things were relevant to my 80-person, $16 million firm, which I thought was fascinating. It shows the power of like common philosophical basis in terms of practices and relevant. That was really exciting. So those 3 organizations, I'm a big fan of all 3 of them. They serve different niches. We maintain our relationships in all 3. Tugboat is the members of Tugboat are limited to the CEO or president or chair of the company. So you're having conversations with people who have your job, which is very interesting. Small Giants is very open to anybody from any part of the company or any role in the company who wants to attend. A lot of the Tugboat people are also Small Giants folks. And then CPO's consortium is all similarly open, but mostly, manager leader people.
I think you've got great wisdom, Carl, on several fronts, and I don't think it's not just the beard that I think also communicates that. I think you're the only person I would say in the West Michigan business community. I think the first time I talked to you, I just had gotten a paper accepted when we first talked, and you were the only one to say, I want to read that paper. So I think that
you still owe me that copy too, by the way.
Do I still need to send that to you? Did I not do that? Okay, I'm going to send it to you.
It was in copy editing when we last talked.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably still there given their pace, but I'll send that to you. So maybe we'd love to pivot a little bit to a whole other aspect now of your professional career, which is you are chairman for the Michigan Capital Network, focused on venture capital. Maybe share a little bit about what your organization does and your role there.
Sure. That's equally exciting to me nowadays. Michigan Capital Network is an early stage venture investment firm that grew out of something called the Grand Angels, which is an angel network located in Grand Rapids. Grand Angels was created 16 years ago with 4 long-sighted founders who recognized that there was very little early stage capital available in West Michigan. And we had ideas and we had talent, but we had very little capital. So Grand Angels came together as a loosely organized group of people who were interested in investing in founders of companies at an early stage, but who weren't that experienced doing it. And so, no surprise, there was an awful lot of learning that took place in those early years. And one of the things that we learned over time was that a committed capital fund gives you, as an investor, more diversification. You're not making individual investment bets, $25,000 at a time. You're committing a bigger chunk of capital, and then you have a team that's vetting and looking at investments for you, and that gives you a higher likelihood of a good return. But at the same time, we've blended the use of committed capital funds. We're on our 4th fund with the individual angel investing. So we might see an early stage company that's a little bit too early for our fund, and yet they'll attract the attention and the interest of a few of the angel members. So we'll make an angel investment initially. A couple of years later, we might be looking at that company again if they've gotten traction and things are going well. And then the fund can look at it as an investment. So we've had some success stories that way that are really cool to see. And on top of that, so Grand Angels was a kind of a complicated beast because it had grown and been successful, challenged our structure. And so we've refactored it last year into a nonprofit organization. That's the Michigan Capital Network. And then we have affiliates in 4 other cities. So there are a total of 4 MCN affiliates. There's Grand Rapids, Flint, Kalamazoo, Detroit, and hopefully another city. Midland. I missed that one, and hopefully another city very soon. So we're actually 5 headed towards 6. So we're having greater impact because we're reaching people across the state. We're bringing people together in their communities, which I think has a great knock-on benefit of, like, they're getting to know each other, they're doing business with each other, they're caring about the community they live in. It's common community, so they're serving on each other's boards or on nonprofit boards together, all those kind of things that aren't formally a part of our purpose. But our formal purpose is to educate, to grow, and to diversify the base of early stage investors in Michigan. And that last bit about diversification is very important to me personally. If you look at the stats about who are limited partners in venture capital firms or who participate in angel investing, you don't see very many people of color, and you don't even see very many women. And we reflect that reality, unfortunately. So we believe that early stage investments are a good wealth building opportunity. And when you look at the wealth gap between, for example, Black and white families in the United States, it's literally 10 to 1. So here we have a tool that we believe is a wealth generating tool, also great for our local communities. We have no people or very few people of color participating. Well, that's wrong. I want to do something about that. So our diversification efforts are figuring out how we not only become welcoming, but also a place where more people can feel like they can belong, they can educate themselves about the asset class, and then hopefully they start investing alongside of the other angel members.
So what is so it's an amazing growth story again of, all throughout the state of Michigan, and you doing this work. What is I imagine many of our listeners they think venture capital and they think, the West Coast, or they think Boston. What is unique or special about what's happening in Michigan and what you see on the ground? Because you're kind of building out that network for venture capital in Michigan.
Well, evidently the coastal VCs see something magic there, because every dollar that is generated and invested, I should say, by a local Michigan investor is matched 7 to 1 by outside VCs. So it's not matching per se, but I mean, if we're bringing in a dollar from a local investor, there's $7 coming from outside the state. And I think what they're seeing is what we see. We see smart founders with good ideas who know how to run companies efficiently. We don't have the sort of the gratuitous budgets and the waste, I think, that a lot of Silicon Valley companies are sort of famous for. And they're good deals to be invested in, and there are valuable companies being created solving real problems.
So I want to pick at one thing, because it's something that I think we have in common, at least across some of the companies. You said long-sighted founders, and so when people think venture capital, they think get it in as fast as you can, spend it as fast as you can, go again as fast as you can, as opposed to long-sightedness, right? You have a 100-year plan in your current company. Sounds like your investment strategy is long-sighted, like ours is. Talk about those beliefs and why you approached it from a long-sighted as opposed to maybe going traditional, or are you more traditional? And I characterize that wrong.
Yeah, so actually this is sort of a weird a thing about, like, to live for these two things to live inside one person is a little odd. And that the venture capital funds that MCN offers are 10-year funds, just like most venture funds are. And in those 10 years, we need to get a return for our limited partners, our investors. And that oftentimes means an acquisition. And this is where I'm good right up to that point. I'm very excited to build companies locally. I'm less excited that acquisitions don't necessarily mean that a company stays around or stays in West Michigan. So from a community standpoint, I think finding a way of doing these kinds of investments in companies like Atomic that have a 100-year goal would actually be a better thing. But that is an innovation that still needs to happen. I'm really excited to hear about models where there are different instruments and there isn't a required clock that starts ticking as soon as you take venture capital money. But we are a conventional venture capital fund, the way we operate, and that's what we are.
Yeah, I think there's some deeper discussions there too with why the model is that way and the reselling of venture capital to other venture capital to other venture capital, and it's a unique. But you're right, the investment model that says we want to invest in the 100-year goal company. You know, if Atomic was to take on early investors when you first started out, like we have a 100-year goal, and that's what you're investing in over the long term. Now, most investors aren't around for 100 years. Actually, I don't think any would be. And then, so how do you then build that into a more of a legacy investment or something? Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. And you're right, keeping those companies local and what they look like. But interesting.
Yeah, we need to construct an evergreen venture fund, and that, you know, respects the risk that early stage investors are taking, rewards that risk for taking it, and at the same time doesn't require that a company be driven, you know, either to a bust or a home run. And I think this is different actually than the West Coast venture funds. I think the people who do this at scale and who have famous names in the VC world, I think they do push their portfolio companies to go for broke, which means they get a lot of broke, but they also get some incredible home runs. And I believe that is a difference in the Midwest. I think we are more likely to coach and help and bring our angel network to bear on you know, good connections for our portfolio companies and coaching and mentoring, such that we see more doubles and triples and less broke, but, you know, perhaps also less home runs. But we've had a few.
So I was gonna ask around the transferable lesson question. Imagine a lot of the listeners they're not VCs, and they're not maybe traditional, they're not entrepreneurs. I mean, at least in the startup sense. So I'm curious, from your experience around the fund and seeing a lot of variation, I imagine, in the companies that you bet on. Imagine many of them don't work and some of them do work. What are the lessons that you see that other leaders should heed based on the success that you see for some of those early ventures? What's the characteristics of a good founder there that other listeners can take into their jobs and be great at their companies?
Yeah, and I think that the number one way I invest is on who that founder is. I mean, of course, they have to have a decent business model, and there has to be adequate capital, and there has to be a reasonably sized market to address. But ultimately, it comes down to the founder, because you don't know what the heck the world's going to throw at her, but you can sure as heck be confident that it's going to be different than her business plan. So I want to know how she's going to react to the craziness that happens over the next 10 years. And I'm going to be counting on her character. I'm going to be counting on her self-awareness. I'm going to be counting on her creativity and her grit in order to make a success out of whatever actually happens, versus the PowerPoint that we review and, you know, we're getting pitched.
Maybe one more question before we go to rapid fire. What are you excited about next? You're always learning and involved with so many different things. You've got so many different angles and interests. What are you excited about next in your career?
So every time I talk about this idea with somebody like you guys, I get re-excited about this notion of an evergreen fund to make these evergreen investments. I would love to make that happen. I have 3 or 4 big commitments on things that aren't going away anytime soon. And I also really like to be able to have a lot of flexibility in my time. And so I cannot pick up another big thing, but I sure as heck would love to do that. I think it'd be so cool. So actually what I'm looking for is I'm looking to inspire somebody who really wants to run with that and do the hard work. And I would be more than delighted to coach and to, you know, be a thought partner. That'd be even better outcome for me, frankly. But I still am excited about it.
Venture capital evergreen fund. Those two are almost, they don't go together. Especially with liquidity uptick you've seen the last couple of years of, like, the exits have been astounding. They're up like 200%. But yeah, that is a bold, purposeful mission, right? You're not signing up because how you had identified your founder was she whatever that gets thrown out of the next 10 years, right? But what you're saying is the founder, whatever gets thrown at them, and their ability to even develop succession for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And then what, again, I think the key problem to solve is how do you reward the people that are willing to invest in that type of fund, to take the risks associated with that? Like, how do they get returns out at points?
But at some level, Derek, this is a technical question. There are instruments that are starting to be developed, like a seal. I can't remember what seal stands for, but essentially it's a flexible investment interest that allows a company an early stage company to either go to a Series A and reward their investors that way, or to just become profitable and start making distributions and running indefinitely and reward their investors that way. So I think these are solvable problems. I think frankly, I bet there'd be a lot of people in West Michigan who would love to invest in these things because they also care about building companies that are going to stick around in Michigan. And most of us who are angel investors didn't get this way because we did some like one-off amazing venture-backed firm in Silicon Valley and have like a lot of money to invest now. We got this way the hard way. We built companies that were profitable at pretty close to start of the company or soon thereafter. And we just did it the hard way. We paid attention to culture. We did good hiring. We made sure our business model was right. We paid attention to our clients and how our market was changing, like just the good old fashioned way of creating businesses. And we are forces for good in our community. So I think people would want to make more of those things. And if we could do that, we could figure out a way to bring capital to bear to help that happen. I bet you then there'd be a lot of people who want to invest with that.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because companies could even oscillate in there as things happen, right? They could be, you can think them as a cash flow company. All of a sudden they hit a home run on something and that changes your investment profile with that company. So even just following those events, but some of those instruments are going to be the innovations that we see, I think, in the next few years and around some of this purposeful investing or ESG or down that line. So it's an exciting time to be in the space and look at some of the new ways people are building these instruments or an asset class or whatever we call them.
Yeah.
So why don't we wrap up here? I really appreciate the conversation. I feel like we could talk all day. We had a great conversation when you came down. I feel like I learned something every time we chat. Maybe we'll do another podcast. We'll talk about something else just to hear your take on a few things. So these are some rapid fire questions. So it's one word answer type questions. You ready to go? All right, here we go. Favorite leader?
At the moment, my co-CEOs.
Courage or compassion?
I have to choose?
Yes.
Compassion.
Speed or accuracy?
Speed.
Great ideas or great execution?
Great execution.
A word to describe your leadership style?
Engaged.
Night owl or early bird?
Early bird.
What are your favorite cultural value at Atomic?
Think long term.
Venture capital or software or custom software?
Custom software.
Do you? Here's one that I was thinking about last night. Are you a empty the dishwasher in the morning or empty the dishwasher at night kind of person?
Morning.
Okay, and your favorite tea?
Earl Grey.
Oh, ooh, that's good. Again, Rishi has a really phenomenal Earl Grey. You're entering a dangerous jungle, Carl, and you can only take one person with you. It's a business task. It's a difficult jungle. Who you bring with you?
Sean Crowley.
Okay. And if you had an animal that represented your leadership style, what would be your animal?
A dog.
Why a dog?
Why a dog? So I think dogs do an incredible job of modeling the Christian notion of unconditional love. They're loyal. They're also smart and flexible. They adapt to the circumstances they live in, and they're omnivores, so they can do a lot of different things. They're kind of like the generalists of species. And they live in packs. They work in teams.
Very good.
Excellent. Carl, really appreciate it. Carl Erickson, chairman and founder of Atomic and chairman of the Michigan Capital Network. Really appreciate you joining us and the ongoing counsel and connections you've made for us. It's been great to get to know you, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks,
Have a
Carl.
good one.